Okay, listen. Imagine you're at your absolute lowest, fighting for your life, and you beg your wife to come support you during chemotherapy. She finally shows up, but then she introduces you to a man you've never seen before, and her voice, calm as ice, says, "This is my new boyfriend. He'll be taking over when you're gone." The whole treatment room just froze. 14 other patients, their heads snapped around so fast you could practically hear their necks crack. My own mouth dropped open, but nothing came out. The air thickened. Sadie, my wife, just squeezed this guy's hand and smiled. "Corbin has been incredible at supporting me through this hard time for us," she purred, totally oblivious, or maybe just uncaring. And that's when I saw it. On Corbin's wrist, glinting in the fluorescent light, was my grandfather's watch, the one I'd been wearing every day until my diagnosis, the one I'd given her to keep safe. Corbin, this stranger, smiled at me, a fake, practiced concern on his face. "Sadie's told me so much about you, Wesley. My brain couldn't compute. My voice was gone." Thankfully, the nurse, a kind woman named Rowan, found hers first. "Ma'am, this is a treatment room. Family only." Sadie actually scoffed. "But Corbin is family," she declared, squeezing his hand tighter. "Or we will be soon, when the inevitable finally happens." She checked her phone, impatient. "We can't stay. Corbin has a closing at 2. Just wanted you two to meet." They walked out, leaving me there shell-shocked. I couldn't even form words to ask why. That night, lying alone in our bed, with Sadie supposedly working late, everything clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just an affair. Corbin was the realtor from her office she'd mentioned months ago, the same one whose wife was deployed overseas, the same one looking for an apartment for when his wife returned. Sadie had started staying late at work the same month Corbin began viewing properties. And as soon as I got my diagnosis, she started asking me for money. Suddenly, her cousin's kids had cancer and needed $2,000 a month. She knew I'd recently inherited money, so right after chemo, when I was too exhausted to even think, she'd hand me withdrawal slips to sign. In that moment, staring at the ceiling, it all snapped together. That $2,000? It was their rent money. Sadie and Corbin had moved in together the very day I got diagnosed. 2 days later, I was back in the treatment chair, reeling from the whole situation, when a woman in an ironed suit appeared. She looked at me, cold as ice. "Wesley Hale?" she asked. "That's me." She laid a stack of papers in my trembling hand. "Your wife is petitioning for your medical power of attorney. I'm here on her behalf." My voice cracked as I looked down at the documents. "She's claiming my brain is too damaged to make my own medical decisions." I could feel tears stinging my eyes. "You know she'll stop my treatment and let me die. Why are you helping her?" The lawyer just gave a dismissive shrug. "Just business, I guess." Then my phone rang. It was Sadie. "What are you doing?" I choked out, sobs catching in my throat. "You and Corbin." She cut me off, her voice sickeningly patient, like she was explaining basic math to a particularly slow child. "You're dying anyway. I just want me and you to both suffer less." I was crying, but I fought back. "But I'm responding to treatment. Doctors say my numbers are good." "Doctors just say that to keep you paying them for longer, Wesley," she said dismissively. I could hear traffic in the background. She was driving somewhere, probably with him. "Anyway, you should be grateful I haven't abandoned you completely. This is harder on me, you know, watching you deteriorate. At least you get to rest soon. I have to live with this trauma forever." She was actually positioning herself as the victim. "If you really loved me," she continued, "you'd see how much I need Corbin's support right now. Wesley, the lawyers say this is all standard. Don't make this difficult." The line went dead. I was still openly sobbing when her lawyer, who had heard every word, delivered the final blow. "You have 72 hours to sign this before your wife takes drastic action." The entire treatment room stared at me as she walked away. Some faces showed pity. Others, pure shock. That's when something shifted inside me. The chemo wasn't just killing the cancer, it was killing every last shred of my love for Sadie, every ounce of my old self. I dried my tears. I decided to give my wife exactly what she wanted. 72 hours later, she got her papers back. She got medical power of attorney, exactly what she wanted. Except there was one small detail. It was for dental decisions only. And since my teeth weren't getting treated, it was practically worthless. The best part? I'd mailed it directly to her office, specifically during her partner meeting. I even taped a penny to the envelope with a handwritten note. Buy Corbin something nice. She had to sit there in front of all her superiors and explain why she wanted medical power of attorney over her husband and why there were hints of an affair between her and a client. That evening, my phone buzzed 17 times with missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. I was on the attack now. I opened my laptop and started digging. I found out she'd stolen $48,200 from me. I logged into her social media and found her text to her sister. How long before I can date publicly without looking bad? Her Google searches, stage 3 colon cancer life expectancy. I discovered she tried to raise my life insurance 3 separate times in the last 8 months. All denied, flagged as suspicious. Meanwhile, her social media showed her at cancer support groups, wearing ribbons, donating my money to cancer research. My lawyer, Claire, was drafting up divorce papers when another letter came in. I was being summoned to court. Sadi was petitioning to be given control of all my finances, as if she hadn't stolen enough. When court day arrived, I walked in, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I immediately noticed a new, faint scar on Sadi's arm that I'd never seen before. The trial began, and Corbin, her support, instantly got on the stand. He sat there, hands folded, a perfect mask of practiced concern, tears already plastered all over his face. I've been close with the family for 2 years now, he began. He even made eye contact with me. But his gaze slid away quickly. Wesley used to be vibrant, but now he's changed. Just last week, he threw his medicine in the trash. Then, he choked on a sob. Sadi has a scar on her arm from when he threw boiling water at her. The entire courtroom gasped. Sadi, with her own welling tears, dramatically lifted her sleeve, touching the scar. It's true, Your Honor, she added, her voice trembling. Even the judge looked disgusted. By the time Corbin was done, they clearly believed they'd won. They didn't realize that chemo wasn't just killing the cancer. It was killing every part of me that had ever loved Sadi. So, when I got on the stand, they had no idea what was coming. I took a slow, deep breath and looked straight at the judge. My hands, surprisingly, were steady as I opened the folder in front of me. Sadi and I were happy until my diagnosis, I explained, keeping my voice calm and clear. Then, everything changed overnight when she suddenly needed money for her cousin's sick kids. I pulled out the first document, a stack of bank statements, highlighted in yellow. The withdrawals started the exact week I got diagnosed, I said, pointing to the dates. $2,000, every single month. The judge leaned forward in her seat, squinting at the numbers. I watched her eyes move across the page, following the pattern I'd meticulously marked. Sadi shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I slid the next document across to the clerk, who handed it to the judge. This is a lease agreement I found in Sadi's email, I said. She and Corbin signed it 2 days after my diagnosis. The rent is exactly $2,000 per month, the same amount she told me her cousin needed for cancer treatment. The judge's eyebrows shot up as she read. Sadi's lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgent in her ear. Across the room, Corbin was staring at his hands, his face turning an angry red. He shifted in his seat like he wanted to disappear. I pulled out the next packet, my heart beating faster, but my voice remained level. This is Sadi's Google search history from our shared cloud account, I explained. I accessed it before she locked me out. The judge took the papers and started reading. Her face changed with each line. Stage 3 colon cancer survival rate. How long does chemo take to kill someone? Life insurance payout timeline. The courtroom went completely silent. Someone in the back row gasped loudly enough for everyone to hear. Sadi's face had gone pale, almost gray. I kept going. Next, I have 3 life insurance applications, I said, laying them out one by one. Sadi tried to increase my coverage from $100,000 to $500,000. All 3 attempts happened in the months after my diagnosis. All 3 were denied because the insurance companies flagged them as suspicious. I paused and looked directly at Sadi. She never told me about any of these attempts. The judge was writing notes now, her pen moving fast across her notepad. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the courtroom display screen. These are text messages between Sadie and her sister, I said. The messages filled the screen, and I read them out loud. How long before I can date publicly without looking bad? The treatment is expensive but worth it for the payout. Her sister's responses clearly showed they were planning for my death, discussing how to manage appearances afterward. Sadie's face went from pale to completely white. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. I switched to the next set of images on the screen. These are photos from Sadai's social media, I explained. Cancer support groups, ribbons, donation checks made out to cancer research. The judge nodded, looking at the images. Then I pulled up the bank records next to them. Every single one of those checks was written from my inheritance account, I said, my voice steady. Without my knowledge, without my permission. She was donating my grandfather's money to look like a devoted wife while she was stealing from me. The judge's expression had shifted from neutral to something much harder, much colder. I took another breath and continued. Sadie brought Corbin to my chemotherapy treatment, I said, recounting that horrific day. She introduced him as family, which violated the treatment room's family-only policy. I have a written statement from my nurse here. I handed the statement to the clerk. It describes how inappropriate and cruel this was, especially given my vulnerable state during treatment. The judge read the nurse's statement, her jaw tightening. Her eyes moved to Sadie, and the look she gave her was pure, unadulterated anger. I presented the next folder, thicker than the others. These are my medical records, I said. They show my cancer is actually responding well to treatment. My cognitive function is completely normal. I opened to a specific page marked with a tab. Dr. Okafor's report states that I understand my diagnosis, treatment options, and prognosis perfectly, that I'm making informed decisions about my care. This directly contradicts Sadie's claims that my brain is too damaged to make my own decisions. The judge took her time reading through the medical records, flipping pages carefully. While she read, I pulled out another document. This is the original medical power of attorney paperwork that Sadie tried to get me to sign, I said. It would have given her complete control over all my medical decisions. Her lawyer told me I had 72 hours to sign or face drastic action. I looked at the judge. That felt like a threat. Then I showed her the dental-only version I sent back. I explained I wanted to see what she would do when her plan failed. Several people in the courtroom made small, shocked murmurs that rippled through the room. For my final piece of evidence in this section, I pulled up emails on the screen. These are from Sadie's work account, I said. I accessed them before she changed all the passwords. The emails showed Sadie and Corbin planning trips, discussing furniture for our place, talking about their future together. The dates ran throughout my entire treatment. This proves the affair wasn't just emotional support, I said. It was a full relationship. I scrolled to one specific email and read it out loud. Just a few more months and we can stop hiding. That one was from Corbin. The judge sat back in her chair, looking from the screen to Sadie to me. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. I reached into my folder and pulled out a set of photos. These are pictures of Sadie's arm scar, I said, handing them to the clerk, the one Corbin just testified about. I watched the judge examine them closely. Now, here's my chemotherapy schedule from the hospital, I continued. The date Corbin claims I threw boiling water at Sadie was October 15th. I pointed to the entry on my schedule. I was at a 6-hour infusion appointment that entire day. I arrived at 8 in the morning and didn't leave until after 3. My nurse signed a statement confirming I was there the whole time and that I left exhausted and went straight home to sleep. Corbin's confidence flickered, then vanished. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the courtroom screen. I hired a digital forensics expert to examine the scar photo that was submitted as evidence, I explained. The metadata shows this photo was actually taken on September 22nd. I let that sink in for a moment. That's 3 weeks before the date Corbin claims the incident happened. The expert confirmed the photo's original date and found evidence it had been edited. The judge leaned forward and looked directly at Sadie's lawyer. Counsel, can you explain this discrepancy? Her face went red, and she opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at Sadie, then back at the judge. Your Honor, I was not aware of any issues with the photo's date, she finally managed. The judge's expression was cold. She made a note on her pad. I pulled out another document. This is a written statement from my sister Becca, I said. She describes how Seti contacted her 2 weeks ago and asked her to lie in court. She wanted her to say she witnessed me becoming violent and throwing things. Becca refused and told me about her request immediately. That's when I realized how far Sadi was willing to go with these false accusations. The statement included the exact conversation where Sadi tried to coach her on what to say. Someone in the back of the courtroom gasped. Corbin was staring at his hands again. I opened another folder. These are credit card statements, her personal card, I said. The one she told me she only used for work expenses. I pointed to specific charges highlighted in yellow. Here's a weekend trip to a resort that cost $3,000. The dates match exactly with when Sadi told me she was at a work conference. I scrolled through more charges on the screen: expensive restaurants, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, all while Sadi was telling me we needed to cut costs because of my medical bills. I looked at the judge. That weekend trip happened while I was recovering from a particularly brutal chemo session. I could barely get out of bed. I presented my next set of documents. These are the fake charity documents Sadi created for her supposed cousin's kids with cancer, I explained. Made-up names, a fabricated donation page, the whole thing. My forensic accountant traced every dollar. The money went directly into a joint account that Sadi shares with Corbin. I pulled up the bank records on screen. There are no sick cousins, no kids with cancer. Just an elaborate lie to steal my inheritance money. Sadi was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the screen. I have text messages from friends, I said. Messages where they tell me they wanted to visit, but Sadi said I was too sick for company. I scrolled through them slowly. Here's one from my best friend from college saying he tried to visit 3 times, but Sadi turned him away at the door. Here's another from my cousin who Sadi told I didn't want any visitors. I looked at the judge. I desperately wanted support during treatment. Sadi isolated me from everyone who could have helped me, or noticed what she was doing. This made it easier for her to control information and steal from me. I opened another file on my laptop. These are calendar entries from Sadi's private calendar, I said. The one she thought I couldn't access. I pointed to entries starting 1 week after my diagnosis, appointments with divorce attorneys. The notes say things like discuss asset protection and timeline for filing. I scrolled through more entries. She was planning to leave me from the very beginning, but she decided stealing from me first would be more profitable. The courtroom was completely silent except for the sound of the judge writing notes. I clicked to open a video file. Rowan from the hospital patient advocacy office helped me obtain this security footage, I explained. It shows the parking lot outside the treatment center. The timestamp shows the date Sadi and Corbin came to my treatment room. I let the video play. Sadi and Corbin walked into frame, laughing. They stopped by Corbin's car and kissed. Not a quick peck, but a long, passionate kiss. Then they stood there talking and smiling before walking toward the building. The timestamp proves they planned this whole thing. This wasn't a supportive visit. It was a calculated move to humiliate me in front of other patients. Several people in the courtroom made disgusted sounds. I pulled up emails on the screen. These are from Sadi's work account, I said. Emails between her and Corbin discussing my deteriorating condition. I read one out loud. The doctors are too optimistic. We need to take control of the situation ourselves. That's from Sadi to Corbin, dated 3 weeks ago. I scrolled to another. How much longer do we have to wait? That's from Corbin. I looked up. These emails make it clear they were hoping for my death and frustrated that treatment was working. I reached for my final folder for this section. This is my medical journal, I said. I've kept detailed notes throughout my entire treatment. Symptoms, medications, side effects, doctor appointments, treatment responses. Every single entry is clear and organized. I handed the journal to the judge. Dr. Okafor reviewed it and wrote a letter stating it demonstrates exceptional patient engagement and cognitive clarity. The judge took her time looking through the pages. I sat back in my chair and waited. Sadi's lawyer was whispering urgently to her, but Sadi just stared straight ahead. Corbin had tears running down his face, but nobody seemed to care. I reached for my next folder and pulled out a letter from Dr. Okafor. Sadi tried to convince my oncologist to stop my treatment, I explained. She told her I wanted to do natural remedies instead of chemo. Dr. Okafor's statement read, Mr. Hale never expressed any interest in stopping treatment. I refused Mrs. Hale's request and wrote notes in his medical file about her interference. The judge took the letter and read it carefully while Sadi shifted in her seat. I opened my phone and connected it to the courtroom screen. "This is a recording I made of Sadi's phone call," I said. "The one where she told me I was dying anyway." I started recording our conversations after she threatened me with the medical power of attorney because I knew I needed proof. I pressed play, and Sadi's voice filled the courtroom. "You're dying anyway," her recorded voice said. "I just want me and you to both suffer less." The recording continued with her positioning herself as the victim and saying how hard this was for her. The judge listened to the full 2 minutes without moving. Her expression got darker as the recording played. Several people in the gallery made disgusted sounds when Sadi's voice said she needed Corbin's support. I pulled up bank statements on the screen next. "Sadi emptied our joint savings account 2 days after I sent her the dental POA," I explained. "She took $15,000 in retaliation." My attorney filed an emergency motion to freeze the accounts, but she'd already moved the money to an account with only her name on it. This proved she was willing to leave me without any resources during cancer treatment. The judge wrote more notes while I scrolled through the bank records showing the withdrawals. I switched to my text message screenshots. "These are messages Sadi sent to our mutual friends," I said. "She told them I was losing my mind and becoming paranoid and violent. She sent these messages before I could tell anyone what she was doing." Several friends have given statements saying they now realized she was trying to turn everyone against me. I read one message out loud where Sadi told her friend I threw things at her and screamed for no reason. None of it was true, but she was building a story to make people think I was unstable. I pulled up a real estate website on the screen. "This is the apartment Sadi and Corbin share," I said. Corbin listed it on his own company website. I zoomed in on one photo showing a watch I inherited from my grandfather sitting on the nightstand. Another photo showed my favorite chair from our house in their living room. This proves they're not just having an affair, but actually living together as a couple. Corbin's face went completely white as I showed each photo. I opened a document showing our account passwords. Sadi changed every shared password we had the day after I sent the dental POA, I explained. She locked me out of my own email, cloud storage, and online accounts I'd used for years. She was trying to prevent me from gathering more evidence against her. Fortunately, I'd already downloaded everything I needed before she could stop me. The list showed dozens of accounts where the passwords had been changed on the same day. I held up my grandfather's will next. "This inheritance documentation proves the $48,200 Sadi stole was money my grandfather left specifically for my future," I said. "The will states this money is for Wesley's security and dreams. Sadi knew how much this inheritance meant to me. She didn't just steal money, but my grandfather's final gift to me." I had to stop talking for a second because my voice cracked. The judge looked at the will and then at Sadi with clear anger on her face. I opened a folder of witness statements. "These are from my chemotherapy nurses," I explained. "They describe me as alert, engaged, and making informed decisions about my care. They say Sadi's visits were disruptive and her behavior was controlling. Multiple nurses wrote about times Sadi tried to speak for me when doctors asked me direct questions. One nurse specifically wrote that she was concerned for my safety and autonomy." The judge read through each statement while Sadi's lawyer whispered urgently to her. I pulled up emails on the screen showing Sadi's internet searches. "These emails show Sadi researching financial power of attorney and conservatorship in the weeks right after my diagnosis," I said. "She was planning this scheme from the very beginning. She was looking for legal ways to control my money and medical decisions before I even started treatment." One email to a lawyer specifically asks how to prove someone is mentally incompetent. The courtroom went completely silent as people read the emails on the screen. I opened my next piece of evidence. "This is the visitor log from the treatment center," I explained. It shows Sadi came to every single appointment in the first month after my diagnosis. Then her visits dropped off dramatically as my treatment started working, and I began improving. She came less and less as it became clear I was responding well to chemo. This completely contradicts her claims of being a devoted caregiver who was suffering through my illness. The log showed exact dates and times, proving Sadi stopped visiting once it was clear I might survive. I pulled out another folder and opened it to show the bank manager's statement. I explained how Sadie went to our bank 3 weeks after my diagnosis and told them I was mentally unfit to manage my own accounts. She asked them to give her sole control over everything, including my inheritance money. The bank manager refused because I'd been in just 2 days before handling my own business perfectly fine, and she thought her request was suspicious. She filed a report with Adult Protective Services about possible financial abuse. The statement described Saudi as aggressive and demanding, insisting I was too sick to think clearly. The judge read the statement carefully while Saudi's lawyer flipped through papers looking for something to object to. I held up my next document, a thick packet of test results. These are my cognitive assessment results from last month, I said. Rowan helped me arrange testing through the hospital after Saudi started claiming brain damage. The neuropsychological evaluation tested my memory, reasoning, problem-solving, and decision-making abilities. Every single score came back in the normal to above average range. There is zero evidence of any brain damage or cognitive problems. The psychologist who tested me wrote that I demonstrated excellent mental capacity and full understanding of my medical and financial situation. I watched Sadie's face go red as the judge examined each page of test results. I opened my laptop and turned it toward the judge to show social media screenshots. These are posts from Corbin's accounts, I explained. He called Sadie my love in the captions and posted photos of their apartment with romantic messages. He tagged the location and wrote things like, "Home sweet home," and "building our future together." He deleted all these posts right after I sent the dental power of attorney to Sadie's office, but I'd already taken screenshots of everything. The posts were dated throughout my entire treatment, starting just days after my diagnosis. This wasn't something that developed recently like they want everyone to believe. One post from 2 months ago shows Saudi cooking in their kitchen with the caption, "Building a home with the one who gets me." I presented the timeline that Claire helped me create. A large poster board with dates, events, and connections mapped out in different colors. "This shows every major action Sadie took against me," I said. "And when each one happened, the pattern is clear. Every time I had good news from my doctors, Sadie escalated her attempts to control me. When my tumor markers improved in July, she tried to increase my life insurance that same week. When I responded well to my third chemo session in August, she filed for medical power of attorney 3 days later. When my scan showed the cancer was shrinking in September, she went to the bank claiming I was mentally unfit. She got more desperate every time it looked like I might actually survive. The judge studied the timeline for several minutes, tracing the connections with her finger. I held up a stack of handwritten statements from my neighbors. "These are from the people who live on my street," I explained. 3 different neighbors saw Saudi moving belongings out of our house in the middle of the night during my first month of treatment. They saw her loading furniture, boxes, and personal items into a truck at 2 in the morning. One neighbor almost called the police because they thought we were being robbed. Saudi was literally emptying our home while I was too sick from chemo to notice what was happening. She took the couch my grandfather gave us, the TV we bought together, even kitchen appliances. My neighbor, Mr. Braun Ruiz, wrote that he saw her make 4 trips over 2 weeks, always late at night when she thought no one was watching. I opened another document from my medical file. Saudi tried to get Dr. Firm, Okafor, to prescribe me anti-anxiety medication and sleeping pills, I said. She called her office claiming I was having panic attacks and couldn't sleep, that I was becoming unstable and needed medication to calm down. Dr. Okafor refused because when she examined me, I showed no signs of anxiety disorders or insomnia. She suspected Sadie wanted to make me appear mentally unstable to support her incompetence claims. She documented her request in my medical records as inappropriate and concerning. The doctor wrote that Sadie's behavior raised red flags about her motives and her respect for my autonomy. I showed the court a letter from my insurance company. "This is about Sadie's attempt to list me as disabled on insurance paperwork without my knowledge," I explained. She filled out forms claiming I was unable to work or manage my own affairs due to my cancer treatment. The insurance company has a policy of contacting patients directly to verify disability claims, which is how I found out what she was doing. I told them I'm not disabled and I'm managing my own affairs just fine. They sent me this letter confirming they rejected her claim and noted my statement that the paperwork was filed without my consent or knowledge. I pulled up emails on the screen and several people in the courtroom leaned forward to read them. "These are messages between Sadie and Corbin discussing how to handle me if I became difficult about the medical power of attorney," I said. They talked about different strategies, including threatening to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. One email from Sadi says, "If he fights this, we'll have to claim he's a danger to himself." Corbin replied, suggesting they document any erratic behavior to build a case. Another email discusses getting me declared incompetent through the courts if I refuse to sign over control. Reading these emails out loud made several people in the courtroom look visibly upset, and one man in the back shook his head in disgust. I presented my employment records next, showing my work schedule and performance reviews. "I've been working part-time throughout my entire treatment," I explained. "I manage projects, meet deadlines, and communicate with clients and coworkers." My boss provided a statement calling me reliable, professional, and fully capable. She wrote that my work quality never declined even during treatment, and that I always informed her in advance when I needed time off for appointments. This directly contradicts Sadi's claims that I'm too impaired to function or make decisions. If I can manage a job and professional responsibilities during chemotherapy, I can certainly manage my own medical and financial affairs. I held up my next piece of evidence, consultation notes from 3 different divorce attorneys. "Claire subpoenaed these records," I said, "and they show Sadi met with divorce lawyers starting 1 week after my diagnosis. The notes document what Sadi asked about in each consultation. She wanted to know about hiding assets so I couldn't access them in a divorce. She asked about minimizing spousal support payments. She specifically asked whether a terminal illness diagnosis affected divorce settlements and if she'd be required to pay my medical bills if we separated." I looked up at the judge. These notes prove she was planning her exit strategy from the very beginning while pretending to support me through cancer treatment. One attorney wrote that Sadi seemed more concerned about protecting her money than about her sick husband, and that made her uncomfortable enough to decline to represent her. I pulled out my next folder and opened it to show the family isolation evidence. I explained how Sadi told my parents and my sister that I didn't want visitors because stress was bad for my treatment. My mom's written statement said she respected what she thought were my wishes and stayed away even though it broke her heart. My dad wrote that he called Sadi every week asking to visit, and Sadi always said I was too tired or too sick. My sister Becca provided the longest statement describing how Sadi told her I specifically asked not to see her because we'd had a fight, which was completely made up. She believed her for 3 months until she finally showed up at my apartment anyway and found me alone, weak from chemo, and desperate for company. That's when she realized Sadi had been lying to everyone. I watched several people in the courtroom shake their heads as I read these statements out loud. Sadi had cut me off from the people who loved me most during the hardest time of my life. I moved to my financial records next and spread them across the evidence table. I explained that I've been managing my own money throughout my entire treatment, and these records prove it. My bank statements show I pay my rent on time every month. I pay my utilities, I manage my medical bills and insurance claims. My credit score is 780, which is excellent, and I've never missed a single payment on anything. I successfully managed my grandfather's inheritance money and made smart decisions about where to keep it and how to use it until Sadi started stealing from it. Every transaction is documented, every bill is paid. Every financial choice I made was sound and responsible. This demonstrates exactly the kind of mental capacity Sadi claims I don't have. If I can manage complex financial decisions during chemotherapy, I can certainly handle my own affairs. The judge leaned forward to look at my credit report and bank statements while I explained each document. I pulled out the hospital incident report that Rowan helped me get and held it up for the court. This is the official documentation from the day Sadi brought Corbin to my chemotherapy treatment. The report describes their visit as disruptive and inappropriate, given the treatment room's family-only policy. It notes that I was visibly upset and distressed after they left. The nurse who filed the report wrote that Sadi showed concerning disregard for my well-being and that bringing her boyfriend to meet me during chemo was cruel and unusual. The report also documents that other patients complained about the disruption and that security had to be notified. Rowan's signature is on the report as the patient advocate who reviewed the incident. I explain that this report proves Sadi's pattern of using my vulnerable moments to hurt and control me. I picked up my phone and pulled up the text messages I'd saved between Sadi and Corbin. I read them out loud for the court. Sadi wrote to Corbin 2 weeks ago saying I'd be gone soon and they could finally start their real life together. Corbin replied, asking if she thought it would be much longer. Sadi said, "The doctors were too optimistic, but nature would take its course. Another message from last week shows Sadie telling Corbin that the sooner this is over, the sooner we're free. She wrote that she's tired of pretending to care and just wants to move on with her life. I watched Corbin's face go pale as I read these messages. He hadn't realized I had access to Sadie's texts. The judge asked to see my phone and I handed it over so she could verify the messages were real. I explained my documentation process next and why I started keeping such detailed records. After the treatment room incident, when Sadie introduced Corbin, I knew she was dangerous and I needed proof of everything. I've kept copies of every document, every bank statement, every medical record. I recorded phone conversations when it was legal to do so in our state. I took screenshots of texts and emails before Sadie could delete them. I built this entire case with help from Claire, who guided me on what evidence would matter in court. I organized everything by date and category so nothing would be lost or confused. I looked at the judge. This level of planning and organization demonstrates the exact kind of mental clarity and capacity that Sadie claims I lack. If my brain was really too damaged to make decisions, I couldn't have assembled this comprehensive case against her. I held up my final piece of evidence and told the court this was the most important thing they'd hear today. I pulled out a small recording device and explained that I recorded a conversation between Sadie and her sister 3 weeks ago. I pressed play, and Sadie's voice filled the courtroom. She told her sister she was counting down the days until I die, and they discussed how she'd spend the life insurance money. Her sister Ronnie asked if she felt guilty about any of this. Sadie laughed. "He's dying anyway, so I might as well benefit from it," she said. "The cancer is doing her work for her, and all I have to do is wait." The recording played for 2 full minutes and the courtroom went completely silent. Several people looked shocked and disgusted. The judge's expression turned hard and angry as she listened. When the recording ended, I turned it off and set it on the evidence table. Nobody said anything for several long seconds. I looked directly at the judge. "I'm fighting for my life in 2 ways right now," I told her. "I'm fighting cancer with chemotherapy and medical treatment, and I'm fighting my wife who wants me to die so she can take my money and be with her boyfriend." I explained that I needed the court's protection to make sure I could continue my treatment without Sadie interfering or stealing more of my resources. I asked for an emergency protective order to keep her away from me and my medical facilities. I asked for immediate separation of all our finances so she can't take anything else. And I asked for a criminal investigation into her theft and fraud. I told the judge that Sadie had already stolen over $48,000 from me and tried to gain control of my medical decisions so she could stop my treatment. I need the court to protect me so I can focus on surviving cancer instead of fighting off my wife. The judge nodded slowly, making notes while I spoke. She announced a short recess to review all the evidence I'd presented. I stepped down from the witness stand and sat next to Claire at our table. My hands were shaking, and I felt completely drained from reliving everything. Claire squeezed my shoulder and whispered that I did an amazing job. Across the courtroom, Sadie and her lawyer, Jason, were having a heated, whispered conversation. Sadie kept gesturing angrily while Jason shook his head and looked through his papers. Corbin sat alone 3 rows back, looking pale and scared. He kept glancing at the door like he wanted to run. The 15-minute recess felt like hours. When the judge returned, her expression was stern and focused. She sat down and looked directly at Sadie before speaking. She denied her petition for financial control immediately. Her voice was firm as she stated that I demonstrated exceptional mental capacity and that Sadie's claims were not only unsupported but contradicted by overwhelming evidence. The evidence shows Sadie has been systematically stealing from Mr. Binns, Hale, lying to his family, and attempting to interfere with his medical care, she said. She ordered an immediate freeze on all our joint accounts. She required Sadie to provide a full accounting of every penny she'd withdrawn from our accounts in the past year. "If she can't account for the money," the judge declared, "I'll assume it was stolen." Sadie's face went from pale white to bright red as the judge spoke. Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand for silence. She continued by granting me an emergency protective order. "Sadie has to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Hale at all times," she said. "She can't come to his home, his medical facilities, or anywhere he's receiving treatment. If she violates this order even once, she'll be arrested immediately." She ordered Sadie to return my grandfather's inheritance money, all $48,000, within 30 days or face contempt of court charges. She also ordered Sadie to pay all my legal fees because her frivolous and malicious petition caused Mr. Hale unnecessary expense during a serious health crisis. The judge looked down at her papers and then back up at Sadie with a coldness that made the whole room go quiet. She said she was referring this case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. She listed off the charges she wanted them to look at: fraud, theft, forgery, and possible attempted murder based on Sadie's interference with Mr. Hale's medical care. Her exact words were that Sadie's actions constitute financial abuse of a vulnerable person and possibly attempted manslaughter through medical neglect. Two officers who'd been standing at the back of the courtroom started walking toward Sadie's table just as the judge finished. One of them stood right behind her chair while the other positioned himself by the door. Sadie's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds flat. Her lawyer, Jason, put a hand on her arm like he was trying to keep her from doing something stupid. The judge turned her attention to Corbin next. She looked right at him and said Corbin may face charges as an accomplice to fraud and theft. She ordered him to preserve all financial records and communications with Sadie. She also said Corbin couldn't leave the state. Corbin's practice crying turned into real, gut-wrenching sobs. He stood up and tried to say he didn't know the full extent of what Sadie was doing. The judge held up her hand and cut him off mid-sentence. She said ignorance isn't a legal defense and that Corbin should get himself a lawyer. The officer behind Sadie told her to stand up and put her hands behind her back. She looked at me across the courtroom, waiting for something. Maybe fear, maybe regret. I just held up the penny I'd taped to her envelope all those weeks ago and let the handcuffs click. Honestly, I'm still processing it all. The cancer fight is far from over. But at least now I can focus on my health without fighting a war at home. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced such a brutal betrayal? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.